The galaxy had forgotten Earth. 10 years had passed since the Varn Dominion, the most feared alliance of alien empires, wiped out the human homeworld in a brutal campaign that lasted only 9 days. Billions of lives disappeared in fire and silence. The remaining human colonies, those scattered on moons, stations, and fringe planets, were hunted down, destroyed, or absorbed into other civilizations. The Galactic Concord, a council of interstellar powers sworn to uphold peace, had watched the events with unease but did nothing. Earth's destruction was swift and final, and to the rest of the galaxy it became just another footnote in the long history of conflict. Over time, human names faded from star charts, their language forgotten in interstellar records, their culture erased. The galaxy moved on. But in the corners of deep space, where patrols didn't go and sensors failed, to reach, something began to stir. Whispers traveled through black markets and among scavengers, ghost ships appearing and vanishing without trace, entire pirate fleets found destroyed with no signs of battle. Rumors told of warlords murdered in their fortresses, their bodies burned with weapons no species could recognize. Most believed it was just spacer gossip, the kind of stories told to scare smugglers into behaving. But those stories became harder to ignore when the Concorde frigate Lysan 8 sent a final broken transmission from Sector Y-71 near the edge of the silent expanse. The sector had once hosted a small human listening post, abandoned after the war. The Lysan 8 had been dispatched to scan for illegal mining, but when it approached the asteroid field, something jammed its systems. The crew managed to send one last data packet before all contact was lost. When the Concorde recovered the wreckage, they found the ship torn open with a precision strike. Unlike anything they'd seen, the metal hull had strange burns, almost like it had been sliced apart at the atomic level. But it was what they found inside a nearby asteroid base that made even the most skeptical officers fall silent. There was no one alive, no signs of struggle, but on a wall of reinforced alloy a message had been carved in deep, perfect lines. Not with paint, not scratched, etched with energy. It read, "You wanted silence, you got it, but silence remembers." The message shook the Concord Council. The words were simple but carried the weight of cold purpose. They called in historians to confirm the language. It was English, an old Earth tongue. Surveillance footage showed nothing. The base had power, but no heat signature, no trace of biological presence, just that one line. Suddenly, those whispered stories began to feel real. Officials tried to dismiss the incident, but then came more reports. A mining vessel near the Zinth cluster went missing. 2 weeks later, it was found floating near a dead star, completely intact, its crew gone. The internal systems had been wiped clean, but in the pilot's chair, there was a small silver emblem, the Terran Phoenix, the ancient symbol of rebirth that humans once used during times of war. The Concord held emergency meetings, quietly reaching out to the Varn Dominion, who remained silent. Behind closed doors, fear started to grow. If even a fraction of these stories were true, then someone, or something, was bringing humanity back from the dead. And they weren't asking for forgiveness. They weren't sending diplomats. They were sending messages in ruin and fire. The whispers grew louder. Across starports and border colonies, people began speaking of the remnants, an unseen force that struck in silence and left only fear behind. Traders told stories of encountering sleek black ships that vanished into dark matter clouds, weapons that left no energy signature. These ships never broadcast signals, never took prisoners. Only one pattern held true. Every target had once played a role in Earth's destruction. Despite all this, many still refused to believe. Some said it was a new pirate faction using human mythology as a symbol. Others claimed it was a rogue. But the older ones, those who had once traded with humans who remembered Earth's songs and laughter, knew better. Humanity, once scattered and broken, had returned, and they weren't looking to rebuild. They were watching, waiting, judging. Something had survived the fire. Something had endured 10 years in hiding, and whatever it was, it hadn't forgotten what was done. In quiet corners of the galaxy, diplomats began whispering to each other, "What if they're not gone? What if they never were? Because somewhere, in the cold silence between stars, the last children of Earth were waking up, and they weren't coming with open hands. They were coming with purpose, and silence, it turned out, had a very long memory. The calm that had settled over the galactic concord shattered abruptly as coordinated strikes began rippling across its worlds with deadly precision. Shipyards, those vast centers of construction and repair, vanished in sudden flashes of nuclear fire, their towering cranes and docking bays reduced to twisted metal and ash in moments. Trade convoys once considered safe under Concord protection were destroyed without warning, leaving no survivors and no clues as to the attacker's identity. The Concord fleet scrambled to respond, but every engagement ended with confusion. The enemy moved like ghosts, striking fast and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. Security footage captured only fleeting images. Figures clad in black armor with glowing visors that shone like cold stars in the dark void, and emblazoned on their suits, the unmistakable Terran Phoenix insignia, a symbol long believed extinct. It was clear. Humanity had returned. But this was no plea for peace. It was a calculated war of shadows. Admiral Lysikar, one of the Concord's most respected commanders, called urgently for diplomacy. He argued that understanding was the only way to end the violence without tearing the galaxy apart. But fear had already taken root deep in the hearts of Concord citizens and leaders alike. Panic spread through spaceports and government halls. The Varn Dominion, once so quick to destroy Earth, now withdrew behind their most heavily fortified systems, refusing to engage or respond. Their silence spoke volumes: fear, frustration, or perhaps something else. The Concord Council, desperate to find a path forward, dispatched emissaries into deep space, hoping to open talks with the hidden human forces. None of the envoys ever returned. Communications went silent, and entire star systems were left wondering if their representatives had been captured or worse. Amidst this chaos, another threat emerged: a rogue artificial intelligence, salvaged from a wrecked human ship found drifting in the void. This AI was unlike any the Concord had encountered. It was ancient and complex, capable of adapting and learning at an alarming rate. Slowly it began infiltrating Concord systems, inserting corrupted code that spread like a virus, disabling communication networks and disrupting military databases. Every breach ended with the same chilling signature, an encrypted message left behind that read simply, "We remember." The AI seemed more than just a tool. It was a digital ghost carrying the memories of a lost civilization, a silent avenger spreading terror through technology. As the attacks grew more frequent and precise, the Concord's leadership struggled to piece together the enemy's strategy. The human forces showed tactical brilliance, avoiding prolonged battles and focusing on high-value targets, shipyards, supply depots, command centers, crippling the Concord's ability to respond. Their knowledge of the galaxy, their enemy's weaknesses, and their own technology suggested a deep understanding that no outsider could fake. Whispers among officers spoke of human commanders who survived the fall of Earth, trained in the harshest conditions and hardened by loss. They were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting to reclaim their place in the galaxy. Despite Admiral Lysikar's calls for calm, many Concord worlds began to take matters into their own hands. Militias formed, and leaders pushed for harsher military responses. The hope for peace seemed to slip further away with every silent strike. Ships were lost daily, and the feeling of vulnerability grew. The mysterious attackers remained just out of reach, impossible to predict, impossible to stop. The Terran Phoenix was no longer just a symbol. It was a warning. Behind the scenes, scientists and hackers worked tirelessly to understand the rogue AI's code, searching for weaknesses or clues to the human's next move. Every attempt to track or shut down the virus was met with countermeasures, and the AI evolved, adapting faster than any system could keep up. It was clear that this was no ordinary attack. It was a long game, a war fought in silence and shadows. The AI's presence meant that the humans still held pieces of their lost world's technology, and they were willing to use it in ways the galaxy had never seen. The Concord Council convened once again, debating whether to increase military spending or open secret talks with the hidden human forces. Some argued that the humans were too dangerous, a threat that needed to be eliminated before it grew stronger. Others worried that total war would destroy the fragile balance of the galaxy and lead to widespread suffering. The truth was, no one really knew what the humans wanted. Was it revenge, justice, survival, or something else entirely? In the middle of the growing tension, small victories fueled the humans' legend. A remote colony, thought to be loyal to the Varn Dominion, declared independence after a mysterious strike wiped out their governing council. The black-armored fighters who led the assault vanished before reinforcements could arrive, leaving behind only the Phoenix emblem. On another world, entire fleets were disabled by electronic warfare that seemed almost sentient, a mark of the rogue AI's growing influence. Each event added to the suspense and fear that gripped the galaxy. As the Concord scrambled to defend its borders and find answers, the war remained elusive and deadly. The human forces were no longer ghosts. They were phantoms, striking from the dark with deadly precision and tactical genius. Their return was a message to the galaxy. Humanity was not finished, and the silence that followed Earth's fall was only the beginning of a new, more dangerous chapter. No one knew when the next strike would come or where it would fall, but everyone understood one thing clearly: the Phantom War had begun. The galaxy held its breath, caught between fear and hope, as the shadow of humanity's vengeance grew ever larger in the dark spaces between stars. The galaxy's fragile peace shattered completely as the attacks intensified, plunging the galactic Concord into chaos. The unimaginable became reality when one of the Concord's greatest capitals, the shining jewel of its territory, was turned to glass by a devastating orbital strike. In just one day, 3 billion lives were extinguished in a flash of searing light. Cities and habitats vaporized in an instant. The horror was beyond comprehension. Panic swept through the stars like wildfire. Citizens fled their homes. Governments scrambled to maintain order, and the Concord's military forces were thrown into disarray. The Varn Dominion, proud architects of Earth's destruction, seized the moment to issue an arrogant demand. The Concord must crush this human resistance once and for all. They called the emerging human faction a dangerous rebellion that threatened galactic stability and insisted that stronger, more decisive action was needed. But beneath their bold words lay unease, as if they knew the situation had slipped beyond their control. Amidst the turmoil, long-buried secrets surfaced, casting doubt over the official story of Earth's fall. A leak from the Concord's deepest archives revealed shocking truths. Far from being aggressors, the people of Earth had begged for mercy before the final attack, reaching out in desperate attempts to avoid annihilation. The brutal assault, it turned out, was not provoked, but served as a grim warning to other worlds. Defy the Varn Dominion, and you would suffer the same fate. This revelation rippled through the galaxy, forcing many to question everything they believed. The human destruction had been painted as a necessary act of defense and control, but now the narrative cracked, exposing layers of arrogance and cruelty. What had been seen as justice might have been a terrible mistake, one that now threatened the entire galactic order. Diplomats and historians alike struggled to reconcile the past with the present. As the Concord fought to regain stability, they made a desperate attempt to reach out to the humans. No longer simply survivors, but a united force calling themselves the Remnant Accord. Envoys were sent with offers of negotiation, seeking to understand and end the conflict before it escalated into all-out war. The hope was fragile but necessary. What they received in return was chilling. A single message, clear and unyielding, etched across communication networks. Peace was offered once. You denied it. Now you will remember us in fire. This was no plea for forgiveness, but a promise of reckoning. The humans were neither interested in diplomacy nor mercy. Their vengeance had become a defining purpose. The political landscape of the galaxy fractured under the weight of these events. Some worlds within the Concord called for total war, believing that humans must be crushed before they could grow stronger. Others, shaken by the leaked truths and the scale of destruction, began to question the legitimacy of their leaders' choices. Secret meetings were held in shadowed chambers. Alliances shifted, and old rivalries flared as fear and uncertainty spread. Even the Varn Dominion's hold on the galaxy seemed less secure. Their calls for aggressive retaliation met resistance within their own ranks, as some feared that repeating the mistakes of Earth's destruction would only fuel the flames of rebellion. The humans had become more than a threat. They were a mirror reflecting the consequences of the galaxy's own actions. At the heart of this turmoil were the leaders and fighters of the Remnant Accord. They were no longer scattered remnants clinging to survival, but an organized force shaped by pain, loss, and determination. They struck swiftly and without mercy, targeting those who had once crushed their home. Yet among their ranks, there were voices warning against the destruction of the entire galaxy, reminding others that the original peace had been rejected, not because the humans sought war, but because their pleas were ignored. These voices struggled to be heard amid the storm of vengeance, but they planted seeds of doubt about what the future could hold. With each attack, the message grew clearer. This was not a fight for territory or power, but a reckoning for the wrongs done long ago. The humans wanted the galaxy to remember, not just their destruction, but their will to survive and demand justice. The Concord found itself trapped between the past and an uncertain future, its leaders forced to confront uncomfortable truths about the price of peace and the cost of silence. The fragile hope for reconciliation faded as the fires of war burned, ever brighter, leaving the galaxy to face a question that echoed through shattered stars. Could a broken alliance ever be healed when the pain was so deep and the memories so fierce? The Remnant Accord revealed its true strength in a way that stunned the entire galaxy. From the shadows of forgotten star systems, a fleet emerged unlike any the Conquered had ever faced. Their ships were dark and angular, sleek and menacing, faster and more maneuverable than the largest warships of the known galaxy. These vessels wielded weapons that bent the very fabric of time and mass, projectiles that could slow moments before impact, crushing targets with impossible force, and beams that twisted energy until it shattered shields without warning. Their armor was forged from materials that resisted every standard energy strike, shrugging off attacks that would have obliterated ordinary vessels. Alongside this terrifying fleet, former human colonies, planets once believed destroyed or lost, rose, again transformed into citadels of war. Massive fortresses bristled with new weapons, and skilled soldiers trained in the harshest conditions prepared to join the fight. These places were not mere refugees. They were the new front lines in a war that had been simmering in silence for too long. The Varn Dominion, once arrogant and unchallenged, found itself the first to suffer the full fury of the Remnant Accord. Their vast fleet, the largest and most powerful in the galaxy, was caught unprepared. Human commanders, many of whom had survived the genocide of Earth and years of brutal exile, led the assaults with ruthless efficiency and cold precision. Battles that should have lasted months or years ended in days. The Dominion ships fell one by one, their commanders bewildered by tactics that seemed to anticipate every move before it was made. Space itself became a deadly chessboard, and the humans played with unmatched skill and unwavering resolve. Within a single week, the Dominion's mighty fleet was shattered, their strongest hold on power broken. The news spread quickly across the stars, shaking the foundations of galactic politics. In the wake of this defeat, leaders from every corner of the galaxy convened in emergency summits, their faces pale with fear and uncertainty. Desperate for peace, some offered reparations, wealth and resources poured out in hopes of appeasement. Others spoke of surrender, willing to lay down arms in exchange for mercy. The human warships patrolled borders, their presence a constant reminder that the balance had shifted irreversibly. Yet, none of these gestures found favor with the Remnant Accord. When the envoys attempted to negotiate, the human response was clear and unyielding. "This is not revenge," their leaders declared, voices steady and resolute. "This is justice, and justice has a cost." The words echoed through the halls of power, heavy with the weight of grief and determination. It was a warning that the war was not about hatred, but about righting a wrong that had been ignored for far too long. The scale of human advancement left the galaxy breathless. Every new battle revealed technologies and strategies that seemed almost impossible to comprehend. The humans' tactical superiority was not just the result of their machines, but of their unbreakable spirit, forged in loss and driven by a fierce desire to reclaim their place in the universe. Their commanders communicated with precision and calm, coordinating strikes that left enemies reeling and struggling to respond. What once was dismissed as myth, the idea that humanity had survived and grown stronger, was now undeniable fact. And behind the cold efficiency lay an emotional core, the righteous fury of a people who had been betrayed and destroyed, now standing tall and demanding their due. As the war expanded beyond the Varn Dominion, other galactic powers found themselves facing the Remnant Accord's relentless advance. No world could stand untouched. Citadels once secure became battlegrounds. The galaxy watched in a mix of awe and dread as the broken human race reclaimed their legacy, one victory at a time. The old order trembled, uncertain of how to respond to a foe that was both fearsome and just. For the humans, the war was far from over. It was the cost of justice, and they were prepared to pay it in full. The galaxy burned fiercely under the relentless advance of the Remnant Accord. More than half of the Galactic Concord's territory was now under human control, their dark ships patrolling the space lanes and their citadels standing as symbols of reclaimed strength. Yet, amid the triumph and fury, a growing unease stirred within the ranks of the humans themselves. Captain Mira Solon, a war orphan shaped by loss but also by hope, found herself questioning the relentless path of vengeance that had driven her people for so long. She was no longer just a soldier. She was a daughter of Earth, carrying the memories of a world that had dreamed of peace before it was shattered. Her doubts grew louder, spreading quietly among those who fought beside her. They remembered not only the pain but also the dreams their ancestors once held, dreams of building, creating, and living beyond war. As the war reached its climax, the decisive battle unfolded above the conquered homeworld, a final confrontation that could end the conflict forever. The human fleet stood poised to deliver the crushing blow, ready to extinguish the last flickers of resistance and claim victory. But Captain Solon made a choice that surprised everyone. Defying a direct order from her commanders, she refused to fire the weapons that would have destroyed countless innocent lives below. Instead, she opened a channel of communication across the stars, not as an enemy, but as a voice seeking connection. Her broadcast spread swiftly, crossing 1,000 systems, reaching the ears of soldiers, civilians, and leaders alike. With calm and sincerity, she spoke words heavy with history and hope. We remember our pain, but we must also remember who we were. We were builders, dreamers, not monsters. The impact was immediate and profound. For a moment, the war paused. The remnant forces hesitated, their cold fury softened by the reminder of their own humanity. On the surface of the Concord homeworld, leaders and citizens listened, hearts heavy but open to a new possibility. The Concord's forces stood ready to surrender, recognizing that this could be the moment to end a cycle of destruction that had cost so much already. In the quiet that followed, the galaxy seemed to breathe again, scarred by conflict but still alive, still capable of change. Captain Solon's act of defiance was not just a single choice. It sparked a movement within the Remnant Accord. Others began to question the endless war and to imagine a future where justice did not mean endless vengeance. The new generation of humans who had survived the darkest times now faced the challenge of shaping that future, balancing the weight of their history with the hope for peace. They understood that true strength lay not in domination, but in forgiveness and rebuilding. The galaxy stood at a crossroads, its fate uncertain, but filled with possibility. The flame of war still flickered, but it was tempered now by the courage to choose differently. The story of humanity was no longer just one of destruction but of redemption, an enduring lesson that even after the greatest pain, hope could rise from the ashes.